My name's Josh Willows. Depending on what day of the week it is or when you speak to me, I'm either working for Broadbean or Social Referral, both kind of the same thing. Social Referral is just its own product that has its kind of very own unique identity. So 2 topics really to focus on. We've been talking a lot about employer branding today, brand ambassadorship, those kind of words have come around. So I'm going to be talking, and specifically it seems where lots of people here today are doing things on a shoestring budget. So the best and free way I think of starting is how do you leverage your employees that you already have in the business. So we're going to be talking about that, but then how can you use that and tie that back into something that is the oldest trick in the book in a way, so referrals. How can we put that into something that's tangible for the business in terms of recruitment and outcomes? So first of all, starting with referrals. When we talk about referrals, I just said it, they're the oldest trick in the book, but they tend to be the most successful way if businesses could choose of bringing people in. And when you think about it, it is kind of employer branding. And what's happened is someone has told their friend about what you were like to work for a business, so they go into the company with their goals aligned. But they tend to stay longer, and generally if we could pick it, it would be the way to come in. You might be wondering why I've got a picture of a caveman behind me while I'm talking about that. And that's because I think probably back in the day, this guy was looking for a new hunter-gatherer. He was seeing who he could bring in. He brought in his mate from the next valley. Over the course of time, referrals not necessarily changed that much. It's just rather than bring them into our tribe, we're bringing them into our business. So given that I've said that, why is now the time to change? Now, we've heard these kinds of things coming up already, but if we want to buy a product, particularly an expensive product, we are obsessed with the reviews. We want to see what people have got to say about that. Heaven forbid, we don't order a holiday on teletext anymore and look at the deals. We look to go out and actually see whether people are saying this. So whether we're, and Glassdoor as well, if you've been reading all the news, and I'm sure you have, I don't think they're going anywhere. So whether we're buying products, booking restaurants, going on holidays, we're obsessed with what the common person thinks about businesses, what they think about the products, and jobs aren't going to be any different. Second thing is, so when we talk about referral schemes, just as a show of hands, can you put your hand up if you reward your employees for referrals into the business with like a cash? Perfect. And just for future reference, how many of you reward them before a hire is even made? 1 or 2. Interesting. So again, most businesses these days will pay a referral fee. We just kind of saw that in the room. But again, if that was the single best way to drive referrals up, why is it that so many referral schemes are underperforming, and what can we do to look at that differently? So we're going to try and go through some of those. Thirdly, I'm just going to complement some of that stuff. So at Social Referral, we did a study where we interviewed 155 different HR directors to ask their views on everything from employee referrals, social media, right the way through to employer branding. So in true British pessimistic fashion, I'm going to start with challenges first. So firstly, employer brand. So in the study that we did, I thought this was quite interesting. Doesn't really surprise me sitting on the table today. In fact, I probably expect it to be higher. But most businesses understand that this is something that they should be doing more on. So decent event today. They've obviously hit the nail on the head with that one. In terms of prioritization, I looked at this first of all and I thought, this is interesting. So it is the second most common way people use social media is to advertise their vacancies. However, I then thought about it and thought, how many people are on Facebook, Twitter, all of these different channels, and that's a majority, it's 51%, but technically a majority, of companies still don't even play in that arena, which makes me think of what's the opportunity cost of not getting involved in social media. Now, when I talk to businesses often, and this was something that was reflected, the biggest barrier for most businesses is stringent policies. So there's always this real fear around social media and actually letting your employees express themselves in kind of like a business environment. So when you look at this, actually only 1/3 of companies that we interviewed on this actively encourage their staff to post on social media. 35% do a bit of monitoring, and then 1/3 either prohibit or discourage. Now, again, we've heard it said here today, but people can go and write a Glassdoor review tomorrow if they want to. People have got the tools to talk about you as a business. So the question is, what are you going to do about it to frame it in a positive way? So let's try and get some takeaways as well from this. So how can you actually take action, and what are the kind of things that you can start doing? So the biggest thing, I think, and a recurring theme when we talk, is you've got to trust your employees. So this is what we're all scared of, right? People are going to go down the pub on a Friday night, going to have a few too many beers, they're going to write something terrible online, and it's going to come back and fall on your door. Now, when you actually think about social media and how we tend to behave, this image kind of sums things up for me. So if you were to ask my friends about what my job is like, they think I'm living like Mad Men, because later on when we're going to have a drink at the bar or whatever it might be, you can guarantee I'm going to do that. I spent this morning organising jelly beans. I'm not putting that on my Instagram account, right? So we want people to have a good perception of us. We want people to think that we're doing well. And therefore, there's so much more opportunity for positive reinforcement than perhaps the negative. So this is the thing, right? You've got to give your employees freedom. So many different examples of this, but I thought I'd give one. This isn't necessarily recruitment related, but it's a great story from a marketing perspective in how giving your employees freedom can actually do that. And when I'm talking about, I don't mean Braveheart, just to be clear. There's a different kind of example here. So this guy here is called Joshi. So Joshi has a little bit of story around this. So there's a family in America. They're actually down in Florida in a Ritz-Carlton hotel, traveling across the country. So they drove 6 hours to their next destination with their 2-year-old son, and heaven forbid, when they were trying to get their son to sleep, they realized that they'd lost Joshi. So you can imagine this father in his desperation, he's calling up the Ritz-Carlton hotel to say, can you find him, whatever it might be. So they managed to find him in the end. He was about to be washed with all of the towels, but they got hold of him. So he said, look, my son's crying, there's nothing I can do. Can you please just do me a massive favor and just take a picture of Joshi and send it to me so I can show him that he's okay, and maybe that might be able to do that. So it's safe to say the Ritz-Carlton hotels took that to way beyond where they needed to. So they actually put together a photo album of his stay there. So there he is, just chilling out by the pool, made some pals, got a massage. But to be fair, he was staying there free of charge, so he had to pay his way. So he did a little stint on beach patrol, and sat in the security room as well, making sure there was nothing bad going on. Now, that was a business, and they celebrate this in their culture. This turned out to be one of the most effective pieces of marketing they did because people started talking about it online. They got that social advocacy. They got people talking about them in an authentic way. They benefited from that hugely. We're standing here, or I'm standing here, telling you that story today. It's come all the way over to here. And it just shows if you give your employees the freedom to actually behave in that way, what they can do for your business. So I took this actually from a great book that I read called The Power of Moments. So The Power of Moments, it talks about certain things. So one of the things that stuck in my mind was the Disneyland paradox, which is 95% of the time that you're in Disneyland is terrible. Actually think about it in your head, right? Your kids have had too much sugar, there's lines everywhere, it's hot. But what do you think of when you think of Disneyland? Well, you think of the rides, you think of the first time that your kids met Mickey Mouse. And that's what we're looking for as businesses, is taking those small little moments and magnifying them to take that out to the general public. And what you can start doing with that is creating really interesting stories. So we actually, I was laughing to myself earlier because Sarah from SMRS had some exactly the same stats. We're obviously doing some similar research. But the things that we're talking about, 90% of people trust brands. I'm not going to go over that, but what we know is people trust people and what they say. So when we're looking at your employees, this is the way that I kind of look to think of it. And I think when we're talking about referrals, because this is what I was ultimately linking it back to, we need to reframe the way that we see that. Referrals shouldn't just necessarily be, I've worked with this person for 4 years so I can bring them into the business. You should be looking at what the reach that your employees already have. So the average person has around 400 social and professional connections. So if you take your business, how many employees you have in your business, times that by 400, that's the potential reach that you have out there into the market, which actually makes me think, how can you not, your employees have already done the hard work, they've already gone out and built those networks. So the question is, what are you going to do about it, and how can you actually leverage them in order to get the results that you need? So that moves on to how do you actually incentivize your employees, or how do you reward them to become part of these businesses, to become social advocates? So when I was thinking about this, and I asked at the beginning about who pays money, so is anyone familiar with bloodletting? It's an old, okay, so I'm going to give you, it's a really old way that we used to treat our patients. As surgeons, for about 2,000 years, used to treat patients with bloodletting. This is how it worked. You came in, you was really, really sick, and what they would do is they'd draw blood out of you. And one of two things would happen. One, you would get better. Hooray, the bloodletting worked. Or two, you would die. And as we probably know, taking a load of blood out of you when you're ill isn't a great thing. But then they would go, you were too sick anyway. So this is kind of what most of us have been doing over our referral programs, not literally drawing blood, but we are just paying people referral fees, and then we get a little bit down the line, we go, our referral scheme's not really working, let's up the fee. And we don't actually think about changing the variables in order to see what the different outcomes are. So, what is this? So there's loads, and it was really interesting just listening to the previous talk on treating people or looking and learning lessons from consumer marketing. So there's another great book called The Hook Model, which actually more designed in the consumer space to think, how do we engage with products and why do we keep coming back for more? So they tend to find there's various different reasons why we might engage with apps or different schemes or whatever it might be. So firstly, and they're all quite primal desires, rewards of the tribes. This is obvious, right? So we do things because we want to feel part of a group, or we want that gratification of being part of a group. Rewards of the hunt, which is we do things for money, for power, whatever it might be in that space. Or rewards of the self, so we want to feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside. Right? So what we were looking to focus on, or what I'm going to focus on in this presentation, is the rewards of the hunt. So I asked the question before about how many of you actually reward your employees before a hire is even made. So businesses tend to actually do this to us all the time. So we're actually classically conditioned to behave in this way we know what we want. We're in a society now of instant gratification. As soon as we buy a coffee, we get a little reward for it. We get a little thing to go back. So the example I always use actually, and maybe it's just because I like peri-peri chicken, but it's the Nando's example. So there was actually a time in the UK when they first digitalized their card that 1 in 10 adults had a Nando's loyalty card in their card. Now look, as I said, I love chicken as much as the next guy, but you can't deny how that kind of helped to revolutionize them as a food chain and bring them into our consciousness. So we looked at how can we start looking at the way that referral schemes are run and social advocacy, and how can we tie those in together? So what we had to do was look at, well, how do you actually break down a hiring process in order to incentivize your employees more effectively? And if you think about it, most referral schemes that are out there today are all focused on output. We're all focused on when a hire is made. We don't look at any of the inputs that actually go into it. So then let's look back and say, well, what's actually in your employees' control? They can't control if someone applies for a job, if they manage to make it through the interviews, but what they can control is how often they share. That's something that is in their control. So how about you start recognizing them on those kinds of bits of behavior as well as the hires? So if you think, if just for sharing a piece of content I'm rewarded, what you'll start seeing is people driving more towards that. And it can be quite simple here. So you'll see here 5 points for a share as an example. Well, then you can start saying things like if 1 point equals 1p, perhaps 1,000 points equals a £10 Amazon voucher. Maybe you get a couple of cups of coffee on the company. If you don't have any budget as such, maybe you can look at more things like company gifts. Company gifts can be anything. It could be come and get your free t-shirt. It could just be internal recognition. It could be an extra hour's lunch. But how can you actually incentivize them to keep doing that? And then probably my favorite with employer branding, donations to charity. So great for corporate responsibility, but also as well you're tying in with that rewards to the self. You're making your employees feel like they've contributed something back as well. Now, again, it's a theme that we've heard a few times, but we're always great in recruitment or in HR thinking we know what people want. How about we just ask them what they want? So one thing that's free to do is to send around a survey monkey to your business, although you might find this blows their mind because they've never actually been asked before, but you can send it around and actually ask them. So an example being when we was at Broadbean, some of our developers come back and said that Bitcoin would be really interesting for them. Wouldn't have occurred to me in a million years. Point is, it doesn't really matter to you. What matters to you is that they are engaged, and people are different and they behave in different ways. The second thing on that as well is making the rewards variable. So what I mean by that is some people will respond very, very well to just getting a £10 Amazon voucher, and they'll keep collecting and go, keep collecting throughout the year. Other people might want to save their points up and get an Amazon Alexa, whatever it might be. As long as you get the weighting right on that, it doesn't, again, matter to you. All you want is for them to drive the behavior. Let them choose how they want to be rewarded. And then final point on that is making it easy. So again, often overlooked, but how do most of us use social media today? Most of us use it on our mobile phones. So if you can get that in the same reference, in the same sphere as to how they are using it right now, you just make that journey for them a lot shorter, and you're keeping it in the same way. It's the same reason why we don't use Bing. It's because, or maybe some people do, I'm making an assumption there. But it's because Google, they do the same thing, but Google's familiar to us. So keeping in that familiar sphere really, really helps. So 3 things to take away from the presentation today: trust your employees, incentivize them properly, and make it easy. Although my marketing team doesn't really like me for that, because if you look at our little banner over there, it says making recruitment simple. Definitely missed a trick there. But the same things apply. So that was everything from me today. If you want to come have a conversation, I'm going to be around all the rest of the day and for a few drinks after. Thank you very much.